TCU has one of the best receivers in the country, not just the Big 12, the country. And their quarterback is pretty good too. Let's talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Don't forget, right now they got a deal going on. One $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. I'll tell you more about that later on in the show, but I want to start today with some talk about Jack Bech, because Jack Bech is one of the best receivers in the country from a production standpoint. I would not have guessed that before the year, but as I was getting ready to do the show this evening, somebody DM'd me on Twitter, and they were like, hey, do you think Jack Bech has a chance to win the Biletnikoff Award? Which it wasn't on my radar when they asked me the question, not because I don't think he's a good receiver, but mainly because, I mean, we'll be halfway through the season after Friday's game. As wild as it is to think, it still feels like, oh, we're kind of early in the year and there's a small sample size and this team's figuring it out. But we'll be 50% of the way done with the regular season after they play Houston, they hit that bye week. So we're starting to see who this team is. We have an identity now. It might not be everybody's favorite identity, but this team is really good at throwing the football. They have a defense that is struggling. They looked better against Kansas, but they struggled to stop the run. They've struggled to run the ball. However, they did do that better last Saturday against KU. So some of these things will change and evolve, obviously. But we're at a point now where, yeah, you can start making some pretty bold proclamations about what this group does well, what they don't do well, and who they are. And one thing is pretty clear. Jack Bech has been an absolute monster this season. So after somebody asked me this question, I was like, well, I wonder where he ranks among receivers across the country, because I knew he had over 600 yards after that performance against Kansas. He's got 35 receptions for 647 yards, and that is second in the country behind Trey Harris from Ole Miss, who has 804 yards on 49 receptions. Travis Hunter, who's having an outstanding year at Colorado, 46 catches for 561 yards. So he's your leader in the Big 12, number 2 wide receiver in the country from a yards perspective. And he's found the end zones. He's piling up a lot of empty yards. He's got 6 touchdowns this year, which is up there as one of the top numbers in the country as well. And he's got great rapport with Josh Hoover. So he's having an outstanding season. And yes, I would say right now he's in the conversation as one of the best wide receivers in the country. And it made me start to think, where does this duo of Bech and Hoover rank amongst, the best of the best in the Big 12? Because obviously Bech is doing this at the top, of the Big 12 right now. And the crazy thing about this is, I guess it didn't come completely out of nowhere, because Sonny Dykes did say during fall camp, and even back in the spring, but I believe it was fall camp, where he told reporters, he was like, Jack Bech has been the MVP of this camp. And as a freshman at LSU, he was really good. He was productive last year when he was healthy. The problem was he just wasn't healthy that often. But I saw him as like a slot guy, move him around the formation, maybe use him as an H-back, more of a tight end role at times, because of his size and his athleticism. And really, the move to outside wide receiver was somewhat accidental. Going into that Stanford game, Dalen Wright was and continues to be apparently banged up and unavailable to play. Eric McAllister didn't play much that night. In retrospect, I know Eric's had some legal things that he's working through, so maybe that was a suspension situation. I'm not totally sure about that, but just kind of reading the tea leaves, that feels like what might have happened. But bottom line is, they didn't have a starting outside wide receiver on the other side of Savion Williams, or I guess, the guys after you got past those two on the depth chart, it was like, what are we going to do? And according to Sonny, Josh Hoover was the one that led the charge before that Stanford game in saying, hey, I trust Jack Bech. I think we got a good rapport. I want to put him on the outside and let him go. And he hasn't relinquished that spot yet because he's just been so productive. And everything has worked for him. I mean, you saw the yards after the catch in the KU game where he caught it over the middle, broke a tackle, got to the house. You also saw the contested catches when he ran that slant pattern right before halftime, and Josh threw a bullet right to him between two defenders, and he held onto the football in that situation. He had the long touchdown catch against UCF. He has just done everything they've asked him to do at a high level so far at that receiver position. And it's fascinating because Quentin Johnston obviously had a dominant junior season. And I will say TCU has not had great success with receivers going to the NFL, but Quentin's having a good year with the Chargers. Didn't have a great game against the Chiefs on Sunday, but overall doing really well for the Los Angeles Chargers this year. But this offseason, I was like, man, I think Savion Williams might step up and be the number one guy, or maybe even Eric McAllister coming over from Boise State. J.P. Richardson led the team in receiving last year. I did not have Jack Bech as the guy that was going to take over and be the dude. And last season, they didn't really have that player. I mean, Savion kind of became that guy towards the end of the year, but it wasn't consistent. And we sort of openly wondered, okay, you had a good run of Quentin Johnston. Before that, it was Jalen Reagor. John Diarse was fantastic. Obviously, going back to Josh Doxson and what he was able to do with Trayvon Boykin, that was outstanding. And there wasn't necessarily an obvious candidate for who was going to step in that role and be that go-to player this upcoming year. But Bech seems to be he's obviously not seems to be. He's the guy that stepped in and that has done that at a high level so far this season. And the thing I like about this receiving core right now, it just feels like everybody fits together really well. Bech is your go-to guy on the outside. McAllister is getting more confidence and seems to be processing things better, just getting more involved in the offense as the year goes on. And he had that great catch and run against Kansas this past Saturday. J.P. Richardson continues to just be like solid in the slot. And Savion's been inconsistent. I mean, it's been up and down. You wonder if I think there's going to be one or two games this year where he kind of takes over. But it's been the Jack Bech show so far. And, I mean, you can't really complain about it. He's done everything they've asked him to do. He's playing at an incredibly high level. Again, those numbers, and this is including a game, where he didn't play a ton of snaps against Long Island and wasn't super effective, but 35 catches, 647 yards, 18.5 yards per reception, and 6 touchdowns for the former LSU transfer. Just a great job. Now, turning over to Josh Hoover. And Josh has struggled with turnovers a little bit lately, but from a passing yard standpoint, he's third in the country behind Cam Ward, who's getting a ton of Heisman buzz, and then Jackson Dart, who is also getting Heisman buzz, even though Ole Miss blew a tire against Kentucky, and Mark Stoops' squad took them out, so they're no longer undefeated. He's completing the ball at basically a 70% clip. 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. He's only been sacked 3 times. The O-line has done an outstanding job in pass protection. Funny enough, number 5 on this list is Chandler Morris. He's got 1,643 yards, 16 touchdowns. He has thrown 6 picks, but he's doing a nice job there for UNC. But Josh has exceeded my expectations. And it's pretty clear to me now he's your guy this year. And I think foundationally, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we're still in the middle of this season. But whatever happens the rest of this year, it'll play out, how it does, and we'll react to that. It does seem like the staff is sort of building towards 2025 in some ways. And if Josh continues to play well, you get him back. You get a lot of returning guys on the offensive line. Your running backs will be back. Now your receivers, you're going to lose a lot of production there. Richardson, Williams, and Bech, I assume, will all be gone. So there's going to be some huge turnover at that spot. But defensively, year 2 of the Andy Avalos system, I want them to be good now too. And I think they have a chance to do that and turn things around and be a force in this league. But I've just been incredibly impressed with the way Josh has played. And I think you got to give a ton of credit to Kendall Briles and Sonny Dykes, but, Kendall's the guy leading this offense. Because not that it matters. I mean, it matters to a certain extent, but we see guys all the time, maybe under-recruited, don't come in with a ton of buzz or hype, and they end up being good players. Like, that's not an uncommon story in college football. But it is worth noting, I mean, Josh is a guy that had good offers, but he wasn't, just this can't-miss blue-chip type of player. He wasn't somebody that Kendall recruited personally. And when the season started last year, I mean, I did a lot of shows. I'm kind of including you in my bad opinion. I don't want to do that with my opinion alone. But I did multiple shows through that offseason saying, man, if Chandler Morris gets hurt, this team could be up a creek because we don't really know what they have behind him. Josh was such an unknown commodity, and he showed flashes last year, but he looks much more polished, confident, and I mean, I think the only thing for this passing game that you'd like to see more of if possible is the ability to go deep and get things happening over the top in the vertical passing game. But they've been able to generate big plays this year with just using the middle of the field, getting yards after the catch, and they've also been more efficient in the red zone. I feel like as far as the deep passing game goes, if they want to utilize that more and take more shots, part of that's going to be if you run the ball effectively, then that part of the game will open up more. So we saw that against Kansas, just being able to move the chains, run the football, stay on schedule. That helps everything in your offense. So that'll be a big factor in getting this passing game going. But TCU legitimately has one of the best 1-2 punches, not just in the Big 12, but in the country. And obviously, like Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, those guys are immensely talented. Just from a talent, ability standpoint, they have the edge. They're going to be NFL draft picks. Most likely, I mean, I know for sure Travis is going to be a first-round guy, maybe number 1 overall. I don't really know about Shedeur. I know he's going to get picked. I'm not sure if he'll be a day 1 guy or not. But from a production standpoint, I mean, Hoover and Bech are slightly edging those guys out right now. And they've just found a rhythm, found a rapport that's workable. And I think it's cool that Josh saw that. Like he did the work in the offseason with this guy, and he was like, you know what? I think we have something here. I'm going to push and lobby for the coaching staff to put him in a place to succeed. And then he kind of went out and called his own shot and has been able to get the job done so far. When we come back, it's Houston week, short week on Friday. We'll get a little bit into who the Cougars are here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I need to tell you about our friends at Roy. If you've just loved watching Jack Bech and Josh Hoover play this year, you can donate to them directly through the Roy platform. It's Return on You. It's a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download it on the iPhone or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll be automatically entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary. This week, the guy I've selected for Player of the Week for Roy is Jack Bech. I talked about him in segment 1, but he has been outstanding this year for TCU. Another huge game against Kansas, 2 touchdown receptions, racking up yardage, doing everything in the passing game. Have loved watching him play this year. If you were super impressed with his performance or others on Saturday, you can show them love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. Again, if you do that, you'll get exclusive content from these players, and you can get involved directly in the NIL game. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy, or support the players and change the game with Roy, proud sponsor here of the Locked On Network. So Houston this week, and I think Willie Fritz is a good coach. I told Parker Ainsworth this, and he hosts Locked On Cougs, which is the Houston Locked On show. He'll be on with us, I believe, on Thursday. We're going to record something later this week. But I was telling him, I think when we met to talk about basketball, that I think the highest compliment I can give to an opposing team when talking about what coach they hired or how they made a decision is it annoyed me because I think this guy is good at what he does, right? So I feel like long-term, that's been a tough job. Kevin Sumlin, Tom Herman had some success there since then. It's been pretty hit or miss. But Willie did a great job at Tulane and other stops. I think he's got the recipe to have success. That being said, currently they are 1-3 or 1-4 overall. Their only win was against Rice. They are winless in Big 12 play, and they have not scored in the last 2 weeks. That is not a joke or a mistake. They have been shut out by both Iowa State and Cincinnati. But they're kind of a fascinating team because that Iowa State game, they got shut out, but they were down 3-0 at the end of the third quarter. So they hung in there for a long time against the Cyclones. They hung around against OU for a long time. Eventually the Sooners put that game away, but it was a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter. They really struggled against UNLV. They really struggled against Cincinnati. But by and large, their defense has been pretty solid this year. And so I guess the one thing I'm worried about at the moment, TCU 17.5-point favorites, by the way, which is a big line. Houston's – there's one way they win this game. They just got to slop it up. Like, they have to make it a rock fight. They have to turn this into a plodding, low-scoring affair, which will be tough to do against TCU's offense. But, I do feel like this might be the most talented or at least the most fundamentally sound defense that TCU has played so far this year. They do not give up big plays. They keep things in front of them. They tackle well. And so my only lingering thought about, okay, how could this go wrong for TCU if they continue to turn the ball over like they have? Because one thing you don't want to do with a struggling offense, or just in general, obviously with football, but especially for a team that can't seem to score points, don't put them in advantageous situations from a field position perspective. Like, don't give them short fields. Don't allow them to just get out there and score on a 30-yard drive or a 40-yard drive, whatever the case is. And then also, can your offense be consistently good? Because TCU's defense has struggled. And Houston in the running game, their numbers are pretty solid. Stacey Sneed, their running back, has been effective for them, 217 yards on 36 carries, averaging about 6 yards a carry. Their quarterback's Donovan Smith, who TCU knows well. He played at Texas Tech and then moved on to Houston last season. And I have been shocked. They were not good last year, but Donovan Smith was pretty solid for them. And offensively, they had some dudes that could go. Now, they lost some skill position players, and I know there's been a lot of roster turnover. But, overall, this is a game at home where you should be able to take care of business. And if I think an especially important thing this week is if you can jump out to a lead early, which TCU struggled with that really during the entire Sonny Dykes era. They've just not been a team that started games super well. This week against Kansas, they fumbled the ball in the first offensive possession. They immediately give up a quick touchdown drive to KU, and all of a sudden you're down 7-0. For a team that is struggling and that is somewhat on the ropes with a new coach, trying to buy into a new system, having all kinds of issues on offense, if you can get out to a 14-0 lead early in this ball game, I think there's a good chance that you see this Houston team kind of wilt a little bit, because it's been a tough few weeks. And no matter how strong your culture is, there's a certain level of oh man, here we go again, when you've seen bad things happen and it just kind of continues to pile on itself as the year goes on. So those first couple drives, those scripted drives, can you execute well, take an early lead, and force this Houston team to play catch-up, which is not a role where they've been comfortable so far this year. Super excited to talk to Parker, though, later this week. And this is a pivotal game. If you can get to 4-2 and then give yourself some time to, one, get healthy, but also to scout Utah and some of the other big-time opponents that you're going to play in the back half of the schedule, then suddenly I'm feeling a lot better about where this team could go this year. And, the fact that maybe they could pull off an upset or two. We'll come back. We'll get some of your reaction to yesterday's show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I told you about them to start the day or to start the show. Our friends at FanDuel, they've been rocking with us for a long time, and we love them. FanDuel app or FanDuel.com/lockedon. One $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. That's an outstanding little return on your investment. Just make one $5 bet, college football game, NFL, Major League Baseball, playoffs are coming up. Whatever the case is, do it. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Make that $5 bet, get $200 in bonus bets. Check out the line this week as the Frogs take on Houston. Check out that over-under. Prop bets, whatever you're into. FanDuel, they make it easy for you. If you've never dipped your toe in this water, maybe today is the day to start. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So I talked with Matt Jennings on Monday just about the win against KU, where this team is, what they're doing well, and a few responses that we got. Ryan says Hoover's got 1,774 passing yards and 14 TDs. It's up there with Cam Ward and Jackson Dart. Hopefully he can continue to develop. Yeah, I kind of touched on that in the first segment, but he is putting up numbers that rival the best quarterbacks in the country. And honestly, if TCU is winning at a higher level, then maybe there's some light Heisman buzz that's starting to build. But you got to sustain that, and if he's going to get more recognition from the general public and the country at large, then you got to win these games and keep stacking dubs in that column to really get the credit that he deserves. But I've been super impressed with what he's done. I think Sonny Dykes and Kendall Browse have done a great job identifying him, developing him, and getting him to a place where he can play. Jeremy Payne's father joined in and said that he knows the playbook well. I talked yesterday about how I thought there were some times where he looked a little unsure of himself in that Kansas game or maybe possibly made some mistakes on assignments. But, one, just great to hear from you, Mr. Payne. We love your son. He's doing an outstanding job for the Frogs. I hope he gets more opportunities running the football, catching the football, blocking in space, because I saw him throwing some nasty blocks on a screen pass and that QB sprint when Haas Haney was in the game. But he's hit the ground running and has done an outstanding job, and I think he's going to get more opportunities from this coaching staff moving forward. Tommy says he doesn't think or he doesn't understand why people think Haas Haney's a threat to leave. TCU is a dream school, and right now he hasn't gotten many reps. Hoover's the highest rated quarterback in the Big 12 and top 10 in the nation. Roll with him. I don't like it when we get in a flow and bring Haas in so he can run for 3 yards or take a loss like he did and puts you behind the chains. Yeah, that's the balance that I was talking about. It's a tough balance to strike. I do like getting Haas involved, but at the same time, it means you have to take Hoover off the field, and he's been outstanding for you. So that's what my point was. I don't think he's a threat to leave necessarily. I'm just at a place where I'm like, if you're going to use him, let's use him. And use that package more and allow him to throw the football at times and do some different things so that you can keep defense on their heels. If you're not going to use them, then, make that decision now. Jacob says maybe we can get a couple more and get on a real winning streak. That'd be great. I mean, momentum works in both ways, right? When you're losing, it feels like everything can go wrong and the team can really down themselves. But when you're winning, it's the opposite. And everyone kind of feeds off each other and builds off each other. And hopefully that'll roll into the game Friday against Houston. And then moving forward, the rest of the season as TCU kind of found their footing against Kansas and improved in some areas where they really struggled, which makes me think it's more sustainable than just one good week at the office. But either way, we'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We are, as always, remember, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and here on YouTube as well.